Honey, I need to thank you for protecting eye-opening experiences of our lives. I need to thank you all the time. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you balance all your needs, moving ahead, waiting, hoping, finding sometimes, finding things you may have wanted. Maybe me, maybe clarity of hope, or a feeling of getting to a place maybe neither one of us know how we got there. And I need to thank you for protecting eye-opening experiences of our lives. Once upon a time, people loved each other. And someone not totally different than yourself or myself figured out that they could really talk for eons about needing to thank you for protecting the eye-opening experiences that we have. And people loved each other. And one of them looked real hard and said, and we could talk for eons. That isn't really holding the feeling. There really isn't feeling you're really relative, either to yourself or to that love or to the experience. And soft as it is, it is soft. It's a very soft, underrated, missing appreciation from probably all of our lives, all the time, because it's soft. It's genuinely difficult to look at that as a person and criticize what you know or doesn't know, defend what you know. Hey, it's a soft, why aren't my feelings thanked for protecting eye-opening experiences of our lives? And if they are, if someone isn't talking for eons about it, and there's genuine, I'm trying to feel what I'm experiencing. I'm trying to feel where I am, and it's genuinely difficult to hold why you know those things and why you need those things and why visiting what that is, anytime I or yourself or anybody needs or has come to focus relatively, people love each other and they come to a focus, and maybe they're seeing through their own eyes, maybe they're feeling a little differently, maybe their focus is not quite the same precise size, quality, reality, and yet what that is, it's clearly a genuinely difficult thing to pray for protection. That what that is for you, or what that is for me, or what that is for anybody. We have a life. We can focus on coming somewhere together, and know that it's sort of chaotic to really nitpick where the appreciation of protection of each other's eye-opening experiences are, and the thanks of these things. Faithing or praying that there's something that protects that. It's genuinely difficult, has to be genuinely difficult. And people loved each other once upon a time, and one of them knew, we could talk about this for eons. We could talk about thanks for protecting eye-opening experiences, and I love the idea to thank you, and I love the idea to care genuinely about it, and to hold it for your eyes, hold it for your heart and your life. One of those people said, it's such a dicey, nitpicky thing. Talking about it for eons, there isn't the feeling. And what protects that faith from anybody, or for anybody? What protects that prayer for anybody? Just so you could wonder, or look, or know, the feelings you have, and the seldomly angled reality, Maybe it's not true for everybody. Maybe it can become true for somebody, but you look at yourself, and you look at time that you've lived, and your feelings, and what you've been genuine, or faithful, or loving, or concentrated, affectionate, or protecting of. You focus on these things, and I believe thanks is very much important. I believe that genuine care about that is important, but it definitely isn't simple or easy to live a life where you've become critical of protecting yourself or somebody else, and not at all ever worrying, what that is when it isn't being picked apart, and how that might ever feel. Is this what I'm saying? Is this feeling like I'm picking it apart to expose, there's going to be some avenue to get inside what that is for you from somewhere, anywhere, and just spoil your appetite, or create malarkey in the ways you determine how you feel yourself, or how you look at the things you're feeling, or reanalyze how you felt once or twice, or a bunch, or specifically at some point in time. Am I really nitpicking that, or am I don't know how that feels. I don't know how that feels to say those things. I don't know how it's going to feel for you to think about it. But I know that I genuinely need to thank you for protecting the eye-opening experiences of our lives. And I know it isn't an easy, substantiable what protects the quotas of such a subject? It's soft. It maybe doesn't feel soft because it's sort of leaning. I mean, what any number of questions about placing. How is anybody a part of knowing how to pray right or faith right when there's a quota? There's these types of we're going to talk about emotions. We're going to talk about vision. We're going to talk about experiences. Somehow, some way, there's got to be a collaborative working that is spanned and horizontal and specific in varieties, whereby there's a quota of, here's the content of me talking about feeling, here's the content, but I doesn't know how it feels. And I don't ask to be given exactly how it feels. Maybe protected by horizontals and varieties of why, the sharing in faith or sharing in prayer maybe doesn't grant avenues to relax how any individual is protected near these types of specifics. But maybe it's in a language, maybe it's in a feeling. Who knows how it could ever be to feel and know, maybe even prove deposits of safety or removals of malarkey in proportion to how we pray or feel. But that's less soft, because then it's a hope to a want, to a capacity, to an exercise, to a given, to a power, to a yield, to an expectancy, so on and so forth. So just being gentle here without nitpicking. I know it isn't simple to feel maybe in words or in any number of specificities, feel that as a person, as a love or a sharer of experience, eye-opening experience. My appreciation maybe grows of the potentials, whether you hears me or you doesn't hear me, whether you is right there or you isn't, whether I believe in you or you're on your way to blossoming to something. And I know if you had the time to look at how hard hopes and yields and powers and expectancies have ever been seen to become in proportion to feelings and sharings and love and real and quality, that I know you would see probably where commitment is. Maybe it's something that in your life you would aspire to want quality relativity in your commissible dependencies or your commissible knowings, your experience with what you've seen, what you've learned, what you've maybe faced in pressure or even in rearing. When I want to thank you for protecting our eye-opening experiences of our lives, your rearing and my rearing aren't exactly the dominionator of what protects, what that is for us in our minds. It isn't really a force. It's my mind and your mind, time and our experiences, and our person, and how we feel, and where those horizontals and protections and prayer and faith are. Rigor and safety, and clearly sharpness of contrast or context or quota that ever occurs, focusable, relatable, careable, knowable, feelable. Our rearing isn't exactly a straightforward dominionator of how we feel or how we're protected when we feel or think about those things. And I definitely think that's near to the lines of how moving in time and thinking in time and learning in time and feeling in time should be, should exist. It clearly isn't simple to sanctify what rearing is after we ever look at it that way. We drop back down and care about rearing again, or we lift back up to care about rearing again. Where is the anchor of the importance? We know there aren't things that are directly in sync with a one-to-one relationship or some sort of lesson of protraction. Getting from our experience is, well, it's a wavelength, but not in the sense of a distance, in the sense of a traveling. Getting from our experience, we have seen, and whatever that means, whatever the feeling, whatever the pressure, where is that anchor when it isn't a one-to-one? We're moving, and our eyes clearly still aren't closing. It's a wavelength, and it's maybe very, very, very broad. And if I were to ask you, if you had to invest for safe to be possible, what would it be worth to take the paintbrush out of the hands of maybe anything at times where a wavelength near to eye-opening pressure isn't in a one-to-one knowing, respect, simplicity? We're not breaking this down to a math really in our lives. Like I said, it's so nitpicky. The choice was yours to path safe possibility. I thank you for protecting eye-opening experiences, and we travel, and it's soft, it's a feeling, there's all these, how's it not going to be soft? How is the faith and prayer and protection for you, for me, for anybody ever real without controls, without force, just as they are, because we live, we exist, we are, they're there. We've depended on them in the past, we'll depend on them hopefully in the future safely. But in those travels, what if there wasn't a paintbrush and things are becoming broad, and maybe isn't real clear that we're explicitly limiting our experience to completely root out the possibility that anyone else might see or hear or feel differently. Maybe the priorities are different, maybe circumstantial aperture is different, maybe the feelings are clearly maybe different, and maybe things are similar along lines somewhere. But if there wasn't a paintbrush at disposal, somebody couldn't jump in and say, well, your one-to-one focus and wavelength focus and travel focus, time to stroke it, time to switch gears, paintbrush. What if it wasn't there? How soft is it for a world to expect brush couldn't be there? And there we are, living, being, thinking, knowing, protecting, sharing, loving, wondering, finding, whatever it is we're experiencing. There we are. Anybody. The world already expects there isn't going to be a paintbrush. How are we going to complicate the world expecting such a soft known? If the world was cataloging our lives without a hand, without an opinion, without force, without any number of investment, without a want, and there was a time where the paintbrush just wasn't going to be there, what do we all showcase moving through as we travel, with or without caring about focusing on the content or the words or the one-to-one hyperbole? You might think a lot about safety and integrity when you care about time and you care about whatever it is that is the important yield. For some people, the yield might be release from concentrating on complex dimensions or complex variables or complex relationships, complex feelings, complex thought, complex stimuli. Somebody else might focus yield on the integrity of there being some amount of truth that is impenetrable, where that's happening and where that's being found still isn't in a hand, still isn't in a want, still isn't in a relative need, so to speak. And reasons why this could ever be possible, reasons why premonition that I maybe know where the love isn't dying, and I maybe know reasons why love is a valuable reality, why love is a part of memory, a part of safety, is part of retention, is a part of ensuring passage and continuosity and things like this. If I know in a premonition that maybe love isn't going to be, or is in some relativity, whatever it is, whatever's happening to love wherever, a world might see love very peculiarly, where lovers are more or less sincere in time. And who knows what the world feels whenever lovers are sincere and somewhere else they aren't sincere, or they aren't present, or they aren't evident, or they aren't committed in similar lights. Who knows what the world sees, right? Which maybe is sort of a superfluous hyperbole also, because, you know, it's not going into a hand at any condensation retrievably. Then what love was maybe finds in time appropriate ears, or appropriate hands, or appropriate hearts, or appropriate minds, or those who are faithful, or those who are feeling enriched in protecting love, protecting eye-opening experiences, for instance. Anyway, things the world can do, things that could ever be considered, and it still isn't real clear that thinking about it, or what enables rearing, isn't ruining why love can exist in the world. There's a question. You might imagine that that's been seen from any number of angles, any number of investments, any number of times, any number of places. It's rather expansive and broad. You know, wouldn't it be great if there wasn't a paintbrush there that could take control of all that broad history, all that broad antiquity, all that broad experience, and use that paintbrush to, let's say, corrode a time where our eye-opening experience is helping us to develop our appreciation of what love has been safely, because these questions of ruin have been a question. It isn't that we're going and grabbing and finding all the reasons, all the pressures, all the ideas, but our development of why these questions have ever been profound is maybe emboldening, maybe of faith in places that people have been and cared, maybe without knowing them, maybe without proving every bit about it. And maybe it's possible to faith, and with your eyes come to find or see things are true or become true, not by accident and not by simple premonition only, or not by simple rearing only, or not by what is always expected, but by the deliverance of what is true relative to our very own lives, relative to the paths that we're walking, relative to the time that we're making to be things. You know, when you look at yourself and you make yourself somebody more or better or special to yourself, or your eyes or your mind or your heart, and you know who you are, nobody's nitpicking you and coming right up and saying what it is when you feel it needs to be this way, what it is. And that's clearly not quite soft to express what I'm talking about, because it's sort of blunt and it's sort of how you might agree or something. But all those things that you work on for yourself, and the capacity to believe, in a sense, what I'm saying in a context that has a horizontal, that has variant, that has protection for reasons that aren't brushed or stroked at any point in time. Having the capacity to feel or know, developing appreciation about love, or towards love, or a part of love, or a part of the planet, part of the world, part of time, part of ourselves, part of our lives, the things we want to care about, the things some doesn't want to care about, but the capacity to feel that clearly isn't just born overnight, clearly isn't just easily aspired to know what anybody's doing, embarking or trying or efforting to crunch these concepts and make something of them in their head, in their heart, in their feelings. The capacity to feel and care about that clearly isn't easily just generated. What kind of safety is that? You know, somebody might not realize that where things are less than easy, there are maybe natures that aren't really for or against anybody, possibly. You know, I might look at nature of safety. You know, it's difficult to feel crunching these concepts. I might say, you know, there's natures here. But before anybody has their textbook or has their school or has their lances or has their whiplash, before any of that happens, you know what, I'm going to just yank that possibility away from all of them. I'm going to yank it out. Because there's safety that is possible in proportion to natures like that, and they're maybe not going to be working for or against anybody in any number of ways to harness knowing of things like that. Maybe some things like that aren't best known by anybody. And reasons why that might be agreed with without knowing in full might be things like, well, the anchors that would decrepitate any number of things that we might depend on casually differently without maybe contributing to solutions equitably, consistently. We might know where love isn't going to fail at the negative pressure of brushstrokes and premonitions about truth and relationships and possibility are maintained efforts near to somebody that loves and cares and knows and keeps and pressurizes. Now, truth lives a very long time sometimes, and realities about truth maybe even live quite longer sometimes. But you might see it as a great safety potential. And no slant on anybody, but not everybody's going to agree with why things like that might ever be missing from certain parts of contributable energy. And what your experience is in your should you have to live a life where it's impossible to agree with what I'm saying? Should you be forced into a predicament? How would you ever know how to feel the question? If you can't see the possibility near to the promise of retracting possibility near to very eye-opening possibilities, if you can't see that there could be promise in what is known about safety and what is known about truth and what is known about learning and what is known about where the investment to love or relate or focus mind where it isn't easy for anybody, horizontals, prayer, faith, finding the time to see the promise has or doesn't have a feeling, but how much capacity, how much time, how much energy, how much awakening, how much investment does it take is required to make it possible for somebody to even see the promise. Their eyes have been open. They felt something. They've seen something that clearly isn't what they see every day. And yet, before they even have their finger on it, who knows how fast they're already moving to already miss what might have ever been known about why their lives are maybe important in places in the world they aren't even going to see, they aren't going to touch, they aren't probably at any point in time maybe even remember is possible. It's all in proportion clearly to the amount of times they have the possibility in front of them to experience what could be shedding light into their eyes or near to what is feelable wavelength or what is a place they might be traveling together. And it's all a big quota nightmare. Clearly, because doesn't everybody want to see promise and eye-opening experiences? Doesn't every time it's ever possible need to be some big conflagrant thing? Does it need to be reared and controlled and ethicked all the time? Doesn't somebody need to be there making these things certain, or making these things good, or making these things lovely, or making these things consistent? How are these things going to work for a world? And how is anybody going to maintain a mind to care about it? How are these things going to be felt or even relative at any point in time? They're very nitpicky questions. They're very strong questions. And they're also very, maybe, apathetic lines of potentiate. You know, I might always care about these questions. It doesn't mean I'm thinking about it all the time. I might always believe that somebody could care about these questions, but they're probably not going to be doing any number of things that I'm doing with the questions. And how simple and how decrepitating reality ever is near or about or with the questions in mind, or at a time. So, the possibility to feel and see in promise, wherever that might be coming from, somebody's going to have the mind to be able to be delicate and share in delicacy to help others feel and navigate reality. Because things maybe get very dicey near to promise and actual appreciation of it. Pitfalls of expectancy, emotional turmoil. Why this was going, I saw it happening in a way because this was possible and I saw in promise, but it didn't. And now I feel a way about it. Who knows how everybody's time unfolds at every experience they ever have, okay? Look at that. Who knows what happens to everybody's experience as it unfolds anytime they ever have it? How do we ever know it's an appropriate time to hear the question? Look at how significant the tempo of the contraction of that concern might ever be. Look how decrepitating of lordship or rule or majesty or maestro or safety yields of the question might ever be. Why I thank you for protecting our eye-opening experiences. You probably can't draw a clear connection to my thanks and what cares about the sharpness of that question at any point in time. You probably can't draw a clear line between the 2 points, the 2 facts, the 2 possibilities, the 2 realities, the 2 relationships, the 2 focuses, the 2 relativities. You probably can't draw a clear line between them. Maybe they'd say, it's a nature, we'll take the brush out. Maybe he doesn't have to, because yeah, it is kind of a nature. But where's the delicacy? Where's the forgiveness that we aren't creating everybody's experience because our eyes and our wavelengths and our time is how it is? And we get nitpicky again, but why aren't we decrepitating at everything? Well, there's clearly got to be a lot of strength in the anchors near to love and faith and knowns and horizontals. There's clearly got to be a lot of strength that isn't resting in an opinion somewhere. It's resting because we have been, we have loved, and the world is a home. And things like this are a part of how far we've come and the amount of time we've spent looking at these types of questions, looking at these types of possibilities, looking at these, what can we feel? And why is it a time or a possibility that we should spend time, make time, care for time? We weren't there in any number of instances to look at questions like this. And yet, some of the strongest rationalities about how peculiar or sharp or nitpicky some of these questions might ever be, it isn't real clear that anybody has to be there any number of times to know that, possibility has likely been taken out of a lot of different continuum pressure possibilities because of problems or failures or any number of things that couldn't be felt for why, or couldn't be capacitant for what. Whatever the facts were, very strong rationalities have clearly existed near to anchoring possibility for safe, loving, sharing, knowing, feeling, self-assessment, prayer, faith, recollection, strength of mind, strength of heart. I know these things are possible. I know these things are possibly fruit realities, fruit of soul, fruit of experience, fruit of life. The growth, the development, the experience. I know these things are possible. But, it's very nitpicky. Because, what I feel and what I bring because I know these things, it's clearly all very relative to what type of faith ever exists near or beside or with or about or upon me. Because that energy of knowing that possibility, why isn't that energy just somebody's go-to to draw a roadmap for everybody's life possibility all the time, in all cases, for all lives? It's a little different than valuing possibility structured for retraction and possibilities and finding promise, or finding the care is there, whether you were ready or needing or aware of why these things might be very, very, very soft or loving or very, very real for your eyes or your mind or your frame of reference or mindset in time. Clearly very complicated things to know how to protect at all points in time, or any point in time. Structure the way you're learning and then protect that structure in lieu of these types of questions is clearly very nitpicky. It's clearly very complex to ever try and define or do at any point in time. And why concentrations of yield are or aren't conflicting with other priorities or other possibilities, it's just compounding sharpness, compounding possibility, compounding. It should make sense to approach in those ways. It should make sense to rationalize in those ways. But what if the safety were already taken care of? What if the mixes weren't really capacitant with the brush strokes in any number of frames or ways? What if our harm was somehow very much lessened about one another? Because approaches, where we're seeing promise, approaches to nitpicking strategy for structure, maybe clearly isn't the mind, the feeling, the awareness, the respect of what it costs for the possibility to be real, to be an unmanufactured, untrivialized, unfalsified, unlobotomized no way, shape, or form a fabrication of promise. What does that cost? Maybe the most unfair question there is to ever lodge, because the memory of the answer isn't picking up the slack to make it that much more real for the next person, for the next time, for the next anchor, for the next eye-opening experience. And yet, who knows how doomed we'd be without very, very soft, retractable possibility answers of a question like that. See, it's a little different than being the force compelling all lifetime paths directably, governably, shiftably, mindfully. It's a little different than the removal of failures of minds or hearts because of what has been seen. The removal of degradation of very, very wise choices. How many very, very wise choices have ever been sustained because someday you're on a path, it's looking real possible for you to have some eye-opening experiences? How many wise decisions have already happened? You weren't there for, but they've already happened. The care has already happened. Where it maybe isn't clear whose time it's ever going to be to try and direct any amount of it. Maybe nobody's time. Because it's been seen, you're on a path, eye-opening experiences are coming your way. Potentially, possibly, if. Who knows what it costs for the possibility to find warmth in your heart, to find softness in your eyes, to find attention in your mind. Who knows what it costs? I look at that question, who knows what it costs? But someday, they're going to love each other. And how they're ever going to find truth. They're connecting to truth, they're feeling truth, and they're loving and respecting truth. I look at that question. That question is very, very, very ultimately type of heavy. Ultimately type of heavy. It's so important. It's so sensitive. It's so maybe good for anybody potentially in time if they get there. If they could be. Who knows how many frames of mind. But what's removing the harm about one another? They're ultimately heavy. Why are they going to be able to find truth? Why is there going to be love? They're going to be loving someday? These questions aren't going to be forever away. And maybe a world can see it that simply. I'm the world. I know these questions weren't forever away whenever they were here, here, and here. But guess what? I know whose turn it wasn't to try and harm those possibilities for any number of incredible reasons, because I'm the world. I'm the world, man. Lady, that's what I look at. I have nothing better to do with my time, literally. Not about anybody. Not about finding the possibility to change it. But just the fact that question isn't forever away from those concerns of love and finding or seeing promise and faith in things. It really isn't. And it clearly wouldn't be the first time anybody's gotten up in front of you and said, I love you. I'm always going to love you. The possibility for you to find your worth much, 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 much more than any simple sense of rearing was ever just going to fully prepare and equip you with. The expansion of time and the expansion of experience, there's clearly it's got to be more than math of words. It's got to be more than the sensation of these ideas, when they fit this way, enable me to be valued in such and such light. It's got to be more than that too. They're all very big steps. They're all very big possibilities. They're all very nitpicky potentiates in proportion to who knows best, or why could it be, or what was sustaining these things. 99% of this conversation isn't mindfully, in anybody's hands or mind, isn't mindfully investing to save the anchor that's bound to maybe decrepitate love in possibility. 99% of the conversation isn't investing to protect an anchor like that. You extrapolate the 99% to any survivor, any person, any experience, it's just the escalation of care, know-how, feasibility, memory, and it's all maybe on a crash course to not uncomplicate why they didn't find the promise, why they couldn't wrap their heads around how stretched care becomes. Sometimes it isn't going to be the world that's getting stretched, because care is spreading in so many vast varieties. The vaster the varieties of care clearly might place burdens on some types of forces that respond to care, that respond to specificity, that respond to the complexity that is, we aren't just one and only, everybody's one, we all feel the same one. Alright. The stretch of the care. Who knows what that is? Who knows how absent of a brush that context needs to be? Somebody's going to respond to care, it's being stretched, it's so near to nitpicky and very big questions. These horizontals are just going to break down if it's just a wide open brushstroke possibility. So how are these potentials felt before they're felt some more, specifically for any number of people, sizes, shapes, minds? The stretch is clearly a very, very unembraceable dynamic in the real-time senses, in the real-time dynamics. And that's not clearly going to unify promise sentiment. It's clearly not going to unify in any number of methods of drawing opinion. I mean, maybe there's safety values, we all have different stretches in our care, so the promise is maybe safer because it's not uniform, it's not just one type, it's maybe sort of diversified enough that, there's going to be, if there's something, malarkous, then it might be more recognizable because we're so different. But what happens to that promise clearly isn't simplified for simple protection of eye-opening experiences. So how hard is it to pay to achieve the cost, the capacity, the awareness, the feeling, the sentiment of protection, of thanks, of caring, of time, of possibility? How do you pay for survivors to connect with the fact, with the truth? Somebody had to care. How could you pay? How could you pay for promise to be constricted in an opinion? I like the idea that there's promise. I maybe doesn't know anything more than that. I may be just feeling. I may be just coming to the experience. I may be just relative. But I clearly feel it maybe with a different sense, maybe a heightened sense. Okay? Maybe a heightened sense, maybe a priority. Maybe via experience. My experiences to see myself in relationships to time or promise, clearly with age, clearly with what I've cared about before, clearly with how loving or how faithful or how invested I am into my soul or my spirit or the planet or time or surviving. They're all very stretched variables. Could be different. How do you pay for some survivors? To see that, maybe anybody might feel safety because of the promise, but it maybe isn't everybody's time to lead any number of protections. Maybe it isn't anybody's time to completely diagnose any number of stretches. Who knows how loose the real as it becomes? Who knows how loose it's remaining safe? Because, where, how hands off any of these questions are as we're coming to our senses in time. How hands off is it when you come to our senses? You can look at any number of relationships. People are coming to their senses about anything. You wouldn't say that it's hands off in all cases. You'd say society, you'd say rearing, you'd say the world, you'd say the government, you'd say pressure, you'd say space-time, you'd say whatever you'd feel. People coming to their senses, it's part of a pressure, it's part of something that is relative to a preciousness that somebody has known before, and it's maybe very convoluted because they're just undergoing siege of why they need to be sensing certain ways. Maybe isn't so clear that who's proving it's possible to say that's a maturity relationship? The way we come to our senses is maybe valued near to maturity values. Who's really coming out and saying that? If everybody is facing pressure at any point in time as they come to their senses, why argue with it? Why stand out? Why make yourself exposed? Because your cessations, your memories, your relationships, they're so unique. You're much more mature, and you're coming to your senses. What's it cost to show the vantage in this light? What's it cost to maybe encourage rethinking? Maybe it isn't wrong to feel you're coming to your senses differently. Maybe it isn't right to shadow it out at all times. But who's really coming out and saying it's a maturity? Who's really coming out and comparing, hey, whatever these pressures are that are hands-on as we come to our senses, why in the world would hands-on coming to our senses really be a compelling director of lives today? See, there's life in the question. There's life in the hands-off of it. There's life in the looseness of the remaining safeties that are valued and known maybe by the world. There's life there, where it isn't taken, where it isn't forced, where it isn't certain. Clearly, every time we come to our senses about anything, maybe simply isn't that experience. And why we're ever going to be able to know we've done anything to protect our experience whenever it's different or unique or separate from a norm. Why we're ever rational. It's so big. It's a very nitpicky question. How it's felt, who knows where it's going, who knows what the aims might ever become, who knows what the investments or the yields should ever be. But it's a good question. There's life in some of these questions. And why will anybody ever be able to feel a way, capacitantly, to know? Coming to senses, where our eyes are being opened, there's clearly got to be some way to differentiate what's smart, what isn't smart. How can smart be shared about coming to senses? Why is it valued? Why are the values moot to some of these 99% ideas? Why? The more answers that are safe, that are semi-rigidly passive, enabling stretch distance retained and remaining safe. Maybe the more life quote that will be enumerated in hands-off forms, person to person, place to place, everywhere, potentially. Clearly, not everybody, not everywhere, not every development, not every situation is going to be there, ready, and participating in any of these types of possibilities at any time, because what they're undergoing, what they're experiencing, how they're stepping, what they're becoming, who knows where everybody is in development. But how do we share smart about coming to our senses? You know, it isn't an easy question to ask with a maturity, especially if there isn't somebody that cares about protecting eye-opening experiences of our lives. It isn't a simple question to ask. And how righteous is a planet that experiences the question, wherever it's going, whatever somebody good or true or aware is ever going to relate to the question, wherever it's going, how righteous is the planet? Because the question has really been, how mature, who knows how mature? But it's clearly not a simple thing to say, you know, we've paid that cost. You might find it interesting, because maybe it's something that a planet needs, but it isn't really simple for anybody to say they've paid for it. Might be a lot of safety in the possibility, but that safety maybe only goes as far as how honest the protection of the safety is for the promise in your life. Definitely. So, quota is going to be a never-ending spree of possibility, racing for a quota of possibility like that. That's what I'm going to feed my people. That's what I'm going to feed tomorrow. That's what I'm going to say I did, I claimed, I made possible, I this, I that. Maybe somewhere it's simple that way. Maybe somewhere it's dedicated. Maybe somewhere it's safe. Maybe somewhere it's very, very, very surviving. Okay? But as a spree to a world, or to time, or to forever, or to righteousness, or promise, for crying out loud of all things, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. Truth and honesty and integrities along those possibilities. Like I said, if it isn't simple to say anybody's paid for the integrity, there's a reason why that knowledge has retracted possibility in any number of places for this, that, or the other thing, whatever it is. And it clearly isn't very wise to try and be incredibly smart about it without being smart about it in very, very, very smart ways. And who knows what smart ways to be smart about that are ever going to be. But I think the point kind of radiates that I don't feel completely closed off to shepherding flocks of learners in time. But I'm not exactly sure how I feel about some of these points being a grab because they're possibilities in any number of places. I think there are places that make readies that maybe are on tracks and paths because of their age and their caste and their uniformity, that maybe are very, very hip and feely near to very, very, very graceful possibilities in time and in nature on their path. I think it's definitely possible that segues of learning and parallax of time render a lot of safety, because these feelies in these make-readies, they aren't switching the brushes, they aren't pulling the stops, they aren't getting in your hands, they aren't making the world go round where they're feeling it. And yet They maybe find and see and learn and contribute who knows how much of paying the cost to be participant when possibilities are actually coming to a place mindfully where there is either promise, or there is salvation, or there is truth or integrity, or there is surviving, or there is life in the possibilities. It doesn't happen without retraction. It doesn't happen without a lot of wisdom. It doesn't happen without knowing a lot of problems ahead of time. And it certainly isn't simple to be up in a whirlwind, looking at a ship, looking at a problem state, looking at possibility, and just seeing, the shadows all around, and seeing the problems just stemming from everywhere, and just seeing the specificity and the sharpness of all things to be considered just way out of hand, and then whoosh, look at this. Look at this eye-opening experience you're protecting in our lives. Maybe I don't even realize what you're worth because you care. Maybe there's no way to put a figure on it. And maybe there's no way that anybody should be able to come up and force feed it to you what specifically it is. But maybe there's clearly got to be some way for you to value and feel, this is a very passionate moment in my learning, and a very critical experience in how I feel things could be going somewhere, someday, somehow. And whatever that's worth, the horizontals that were there before we reached the conclusion, the paintbrush is gone before the variance and the wavelengths even set in, because these are experiences that, if I have the time to listen to this, I have the time to think and feel about it, my worth to protecting eye-opening experiences, who knows how sharp or nitpicky or specific anybody's ever going to maybe fail to be smart when they realize it. They're going to look in their hands and look in their heart and look in their mind. They're going to say, "Oh, but it's this, it's that, it's yada yada yada, it's blah 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 blah." Why are they going to be smart when they figure that experience, that's quite an experience, so some sort of experience, whatever it is, clearly isn't simple to put a value on it. Clearly isn't simple to say what anybody deserves, maybe where and how, as. But as that's setting in, if it could, it's just a critical experience. Here I was just thanking you for protecting eye-opening experiences of our lives. And it was very, 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 very important that I said it to you in my heart and in my mind and in my life when I said it. And it's still very, 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 very important to my heart and my mind. But after saying all these things, when I told you I need to thank you, maybe neither one of us already realized or knew or had a clue how critical a slice of time already is, already was. It's an idea too. The time was already critical, whether X, Y, and Z, or negative X, Y, and Z. And it could be any time. Any time was maybe already critical. Who knows who it's critical for? A lot of lives, a lot of places, a lot of ways to nitpick it. And once upon a time, people loved each other, and somebody decided that, well, it isn't clear what everybody's path forward is going to be. The things I've spilled here, well, they must have taken it upon themselves to make it impossible for the universe to need to exist without those that have tirelessly pained to care about these types of questions, lived and died in the lights of their answers every time, near and of them. And I believe whether we see the point in, hey, this specific thing, this specific person, this specific relationship, this specific rearing, this specific incident, this specific memory, maybe we learn from these things, maybe we care about the specifics, maybe they're all very important, maybe none of them should be overlooked. But I believe there's also a lot of love, and they all lived and died in the lights of these questions. And I hope there's a way for that type of idea to take the edge off, because where we're traveling to survive is where we're traveling, and why we're steady as we stretch, it's very nitpicky to definite maybe any specific tract along that way. And why there's ever obstacle about definiting specific tract, that's maybe the most nitpicky question of it all. So why we're smart and delicate and faithful, you know, maybe I can't affect all free will, and maybe I can't make everybody's decision for them, but in this conversation, there's a lot of light in the love, and in the respect, and in faith, and in memory, and in passion of possibility. Definitely a lot of light there. But why that isn't going to be delicate somewhere, and why somebody's going to be straying from a concentration, or from a rationality, or from a reason, or from something. I mean, everybody's clearly a part of that puzzle, and the variables are clearly contributed to by everybody. It's complicated by everybody. There's failure of ethic by everybody, sometimes, everywhere, all the time. I'm just saying, there's a lot of light, and I believe in the possibilities of caring about why we can see or feel together, or why we can know or find together, but I'm not sure that I believe in ever changing the reasons why specific tract is maybe an obstacle of definite, maybe forever, and it might apply to everything, because it's so sharp, it's so heavy, and it's so demonizing. Now, I want to define my track: escalation. Thank you very much for bringing the light to guide that finality. And that isn't the conversation that I'm making. That isn't the possibility that I'm meditating on. And retaining safety Well, I wouldn't bank on depending on retaining a lot of stretchy life safety where tract is an expansive opportunity, as we're trying to get to survival, as we're trying to get our minds to feel where it is we haven't escaped, where it is we didn't maybe need to in time. You know, I can't imagine how many times people have looked up to God and said, "You're not developing me to find thanks that we ever had a relationship." And how many times God has ever known anything about this 99% and maybe never stopped investing for possibilities for somebody to feel or constrain their experience to care about any of these ideas, and what they would say to God if they had the time to. You know, what would somebody's life look like if they made it to feel these things, if they came to value them, if they found light in smart decision and surviving along paths together? What would their life look like if they did? I mean, nobody knows. But I might rest assured that how anybody has felt about not needing to escape investment, or not, they'd be better off someplace else. The grass is always greener. I might rest assured that if he isn't ever making it to feel these things, they're just going to be just as disappointed when they get wherever they get. Like I said, people have been living and dying in the lights of the answers of questions like this for as long as it's going to go. So, where tract is maybe a looming on the road ahead in the coming sequences of potentiate, might be another one of those escalating brush grounds of retraction expenditure. Why it isn't playing false, why it isn't ebony shepherding, why it is a relationship, why there are those, somes, thems, we's, anywhere where that tract and the concentrate, I mean, who knows how many times it's been run over. But you can beat it till it's got 14 holes in the head. It isn't going to change if you wasn't experiencing the time. Running it over or not running it over isn't going to explain how you feel about it. Isn't going to cater acknowledgement of stress, of why choice, of who or how or why to care is ever a real or stable or possible investment of somebody. They're not maybe for a return even, but I could grab somebody off a dangerous path. I could impact how deep their disharmony is growing. I could shift or retract things near to questions. Somebody can maybe do these things for people somewhere, and why that isn't, or why it is true of mind or heart or survival or ethic. It's clearly all very, very, very living potentiate. But what's it like when the opinion of why you experienced concern of it isn't coming from an investment strategy that really makes any sense for any payment, for any cost that anybody can prove they paid the cost? What's it feel like when our souls or our minds are given possibility to see what might discount that salvation, or discount the opportunity to have removed false things from investment capacity in time? Removing false things from investment capacity. Well, strap it on to a rocket with a quota. Horizontals of variant, where your protection of your experiences is any type of effort you are mindful of. Any type of effort. I know it's got to be straining. I know it's got to be relentless. I know it's probably very, very uncomforting and boring and probably just tedious and, however it feels sometimes. Those horizontals about those variants. And you get into... your opinion about shaping your life's fruition because of the experiences that were ever made possible, because of costs that nobody could be falsely committing to the domicile of, who knows what type of levity or salvation you're going to experience whenever you ever experience that. Who knows why that's ever going to stay the case, because you're smart about why you ever choose things along lines or tracks to ever let them be felt or remembered or considered in value ships. And by the time you get there, your focus on the structure of the cost or the equity of the resources or the time and time and time and time again, or the stratagem to over or underperform, it's all way out of focus. Way out of focus. And it's nitpicky because it's just maybe that simple to see that faith and time and prayer and love, these forces of knowing how we are getting to find enrichment potential, they have got to be very, very, very strong horizontal safeties that are very, 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 very much hands-off in any number of coming to senses relationships. And I can't really get into stressing what that is going to feel like for anybody, or how difficult it's going to be to stay on a track or path in those relationships. And there again, why does that conflict with any number of anchors or energies or faiths that I bring the light to, or that the world is holding possibility for? Why that complicates that at any point in time? Because people need specific investment. People need the nurturing that is going to cater for their specific needs time and time, because of what specifically. Why that isn't just stuck on a wall. Why that isn't just put and pasted the way somebody chose because it has to be that way no matter what. Why that is ever a conflict to finding promise in the light that is brought at eye-opening experiences in time, I genuinely can't get into talking about how sensitive or stressful focusing on those things might ever be. But I isn't blind to the possibility. I isn't blind to where there could be conflict. I isn't completely unaware of how impossible, because we're separate, because we're on different planes, because we see and need differently. Maybe there are But how impossible to even comment, because what would be smart? What would be smart? When you're one way and somebody else is one way, and they're different one ways, what's going to be smart with opinion about these things? Because any enlightening, any drift, any addition or subtraction, whatever it is, felt, love, perfect, awesome, strategy, caring, whatever it could be, as it happens and as time unfolds, those additions and subtractions, there's going to be no clear comparison as to why those changes are impacting promise, where anchors held in the world are considered as a retaining stability of safety. Where the changes are happening is going to be inquantifiable variable things. So why it's ever going to be smart to delve near impossibility where we're separated? Maybe it isn't clear what smart is in those cases, or why it is ever going to be smart. Coming to senses about investment paths, you might find it strikingly simple how complicated hands-on stratagem ever seems to need to be, where investment is a factor of separated life courses. You might find that to be strangely simple, and the world clearly is never going to forget it, because it's right up there with seeming to have paid costs that otherwise nobody can really claim at any point in time, because it just isn't logical, it isn't rational, it isn't real at any point in time for safety or relationship. So coming to senses near to impossibility, it's clearly a very nitpicky, sharp type of potentiate anytime, anywhere it ever happens. But you might not feel it without some level of maturity caring about questions like this at a time, in a way, because of investment for safety, or investment to love, definitely. And so I'm going to leave it on this low point, because stressing smart and stressing rejuvenation and stressing the life that is our experience without the gravity of stretch. Why we're faithful, we have a life. Me out of the question, me out of the picture, you out of the question, you out of the picture. Why anybody is faithful, they have a life. I'm going to leave it on this low point, because why we're smart, how we choose, what it is when we focus on our mind, they're all very nitpicky potentiates, and they're all very sharp dynamics of everybody's life course. And frankly, maybe the world doesn't deserve true freedom to just be at reign to off the bat command what all these things mean to everybody, where there's life in these things. Where there's life in these things. And I don't know who it's going to be someday that has to get up in front of everybody and hammer that possibility into time for real, to do justice for all the investment everybody tries to invest, to care about their lives, no matter what their situation is governing as. It just isn't powerful enough to decrepitate. They have to ask themselves what it means to have a life. They have to ask themselves what it is. Is it a happening? Is it a thing? Why is it true? And lady, man, gizmo, wannabes, teachers, I have paid forevers and ages, always, to address the brunt of the blow of these concerns as an almighty force. I have paid it. And whether that means I have or haven't paid for any other number of things, to me it isn't even relevant. 450 billion things find a moment to question why it's important they have a life. I'm paying for the brunt of the force that's coming directly at my soul and my head. I'm paying for it. I don't know how hard it is for somebody to realize. That's got to be the hardest thing for anybody to ever truly steal, because of how irrational it is ever going to be at any pressure in all time. Why anybody would try and facade that relationship, and why I would. Why it's safe as a facade. Why it's good as a facade. But why it really isn't the truth at any point in time. I have paid that cost. It doesn't mean I'm walking with it. It doesn't mean it's giving me anything. It doesn't mean I'm opening any number of doors for myself with it. But it isn't clear that our path of survival isn't in a relationship to paying for the brunt of that cost in an almighty light that is prepared. If there's problems where everybody's caring about their life, they're coming to God. That's where they're coming. First, last, forever. That's where they're coming. So, giving and receiving as a subject and a reality of respects along lines of times. Clearly a very graceful, elaborate continuum of time and mind and pressure, but again, I isn't the only thing in the universe that sees the promise somebody cares about why they have a life. I isn't the only force in the universe. But why I'll be good for any one of them at any place has a lot to do with giving and receiving, because some give and give and give and receive in part and give back some, and it's maybe all different all over the place. And some like it small, some like it stretched, some like it delineated, some like it closed, some like it private, some like it natal. However they like it. Where that brunt is, and where that world is, and why it isn't things, and why it is things, it genuinely isn't easy to step off of the mountain of dealing the brunt of the accruement. There's virtually no falsity in somebody's adaptive inquisition to want to know why it's important they have a life at a time like this, at this time, for real. Genuinely isn't simple to step off that mountain. Genuinely isn't simple to give it in any respect. And that is why the brunt is coming to God first, last, and forever. Look at all these things I've said. Look at all this hope in my heart. Look at all this knowing under my belt. And look at all these blisters on my fingers and feet, and eyes, and forehead. How many ways in the future, in spite of the past, will that brunt be a tax write-off for something that doesn't, for something that can't, for something that hasn't, for something that didn't want, for something that couldn't love? Are you going to be there to quality assure everybody as those questions are asked forever? Are you going to be there to anchor the things that are depositing problems and poison into any number of rivers that you are trying to populate with happiness and fruitfulness and productivity and safety? Are you going to be there doing all those qualifications? Clearly, our answers for these endless what ifs got a lot to do with love. It's got a lot to do with retracted possibility. It's got a lot to do with consistent ethic to care about you becoming love and care about you knowing what you have invested in you without you even needing to move a muscle. There's a lot of things to think about. And what that picture is on a tract, I'm going to leave it at this low point. And there should be the least possible amount of excuses why that isn't a grace for everybody's sake. As time and our future folds and bends and collects itself, it's low points like this that, as seldomly visited with respect, are places that we can't afford to be taking hits of failure. We can't afford to be taking maneuvers that are erasing why we return to stabilities ever, anywhere, with anyone, because of low points at critical eye-openings. I don't think sea level would be very much without this conversation. I don't think any number of topographical ethics of maturing size, time, banking, and wisdom would be very much without a conversation like this. And how amazing is it? We isn't smart enough to prove we can pioneer a safe path to touch such wisdom, and yet it isn't forever away from something that we might care about. How amazing. How you might see just how necessary it is that God determines what everybody wants and what they're after in their lives. Certainly well before and beyond they're ever born into concentration to yield amazing. Where it's so much in their hearts and in their heads they couldn't take it out if they had everything carrying the brunt of everywhere they seem to need to go. Any number abominations, pity, train wrecks, lost causes, failures to elevate. Can't ever deal, can't ever cope, can't ever face a fact like that. Can't ever see in why our promise in holy, or why our possibilities to come head above water at any point in time is maybe much more profound than the given, or the contact, or the growth experience that is, laden because of a resource at any point in time. There has to be more than what can be grasped as anybody is ever shearing the cliffs, facing their forehead of amazement potential in any light and time, because the lowness is maybe much more important in why we are wise, why we have time, and why these things aren't falling into the abyss of where we have died because of the loves we haven't been able to bring to promise in time. I can't tell you what it costs to carry a torch for the future about these points and know how strong they are always resting on impossible, because grasps just aren't carrying or sheltering or protecting or living with the care of any of these types of facts. And you could want to be a creator or a liver or an experiencer of any number of things. The skills and the repertoire and the grace and the power to deliver strength above these types of torches, it just isn't going to sustain or exist in the face of a lot of these low points through time. It just isn't. And that feeling, and that knowing, and that sense, it isn't going to take forever for the disbelief of this to become a weather station. And it isn't clear how long survival has known that in proportion to any number of life tracks that anybody has ever committed to wanting to participate in. They're going to touch the heavens, they're going to touch the clouds, they're going to touch the land, they're going to embrace the statue, the structure, the voids, the plasmas. They're going to do all these things. They're going to become a weather station. So they aren't going to feel it anymore. Why? They had love beneath them, above them, and maybe everywhere they didn't yet know they needed in their life. Once they found their life, they were possibly already headed to be on a go of. None of us would be very much of anything without the knowledge that God has protected about any number of these things that I've choked the air with. We wouldn't be much of anything without it. And here I go. Nest set to leave it low.